Good afternoon, America and the world. Today is Monday, September 9th, 2024. We are facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. You are viewing Issues and Answers on the WCEG Network. I am your host, Norman A. Carter Jr. My goal and the goal of WCEG Network is to enlighten your perspectives about our environment, our socio-political struggles, and those banes of classism and racism that make all of our lives more difficult than they should be. In so doing, our hope is to bring us all together in a human tapestry of brotherhood and sisterhood, bound together by threads of understanding, respect, and tolerance of our physical, racial, and religious differences. Hopefully, we can have a discussion of ideas based on facts, not fiction, that will encourage us to think critically and not emotionally. Let there be no doubt. The voice of WCEG is in concert with those that ring with the harmonies of liberty. We pray that one day our efforts will let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies, as it resounds loud as the roaring sea. Now, if you're currently watching, we thank you. Inform your neighbors, friends, and associates that we can be viewed live via YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and over other streaming devices such as Roku. Our podcasts are available on Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, and GeoSavan. That's India platforms. All of our programs are archived on YouTube and can be viewed by anyone at any time. Please understand that the topics and opinions on Issues and Answers are those of the host, moi, and my guest host, and not the WCEG network. So let's get moving into this installment, Issues and Answers. Ladies and gentlemen of the United States and of the world, our special guest today is Reverend Dr. Carolyn McKinstry. Dr. McKinstry is a native of Birmingham, Alabama. She was educated in that city's public education system. She is a graduate of Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, and has done graduate studies at the University of Alabama in Birmingham and received a Master of Divinity degree from Samford University's Beeson Divinity School. She has received an honorary doctorate of divinity from Samford University and has a doctorate of ministry from the New York Theological Seminary. She is an associate minister at Trinity Baptist Church. She has held management positions with Brown and Williamson Tobacco Company, Accenture Consulting, and is a retiree of Bell South Telecommunications. Her passion for community service has led her to the following, and I'll be brief. Second Vice President and Program Community Chair for the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, Chair of the Board of Trustees for the 16th Street Baptist Church, past President and Director of Programs for the Academy of Fine Arts Incorporated. She has served 3 years on the Governor's Constitutional Revision Commission of Alabama. She does lecturing with young people, public and private educators, and institutions about her life experiences and relating those experiences to our lives today. Now, in summary, Reverend Dr. McKinstry was present on September 15th, 1963, at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, when white racists bombed the church. Dr. McKinstry's 4 young friends were killed. They were Addie Mae Collins, Denise McNair, Carole Robertson, and Cynthia Wesley. Later in that day, Johnny Robertson and Virgil Ware were also killed. Her book, While the World Watched. Hold on here. Think ahead. Woo. While the World Watched. tells her story and more. It's not Black history. It's not Black history. It's American history. And today we thank Reverend Dr. Carolyn McKinstry for coming to us on the WCEG Network to share her thoughts about our country's past and our country's future. Dr. McKinstry, welcome to WCEG.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. I'm honored to be talking with you today.
It's a great day for us to have you, and we will really appreciate your taking the time to be with us. I'd like to begin with this. The Black church has always been a sanctuary for us. It was a place where the ability to speak freely and to cry, to laugh, and to express hope could go on unabridged and safely. We knew that always. White racists learned it and used it to their advantage to intimidate, to destroy, and to kill. This is not Black history. Again, this is American history. The two are forever bound together by blood, by death, by life, and by God. Before I get into that, Dr. McKinstry, we know you have an illness that prevented you from being with us earlier. How are you doing today?
I am doing very well. We thank God for healing and for all of the good things that He brings into our lives every day. And I actually feel very good today.
That's great. And by the way, you may just feel good, but you also look good. So,
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. There's so much to cover. I haven't had an opportunity to read completely through your autobiography, just got it yesterday, but the first few pages are a chronology of the civil rights struggle from 1948 through 2013. That alone makes the book worthy of purchase. By the way, While the World Watched by Dr. Carolyn McKinstry is available. Still, you can get it through Amazon and I'm sure Barnes & Noble also, and probably any other major book distributor. You were the Sunday school secretary of the 16th Street Baptist Church. Addie, the two Carols, and Cynthia were your friends. Yes. As you look back on that horrific day, have you ever thought, there but grace, by the grace of God go I?
I have had those thoughts many times. And each one of those girls, they were not only my friends, they were more than friends in one sense. Cynthia Wesley's father was my grade school principal, grades 1 through 8.
Wow.
So he knew me from first grade. His daughter and I visited back and forth at each other's homes. My parents both taught school, so he knew my parents, they knew him. And the school where he served as principal had two brothers and a sister that also came through that school. So the families knew each other very well. In a segregated environment, everyone knows everyone pretty well. But I visited Cynthia's home quite often, and she visited my home. We were in a girls' club together. Denise McNair's father was my 9th grade teacher at Parker High School here in Birmingham. And so I mentioned those things just to say everyone knew everyone else. And I probably knew more teachers and teachers' children than the average person, simply because my parents both taught school. My father taught high school and my mother taught 4th grade.
Wow. We're glad we have you here to tell the story. For some of our younger people, I'd just like to set the tone of the times, because I don't think there's an appreciation for that. I can remember sitting in front of the TV, and I don't have to look it up. Governor Wallace saying segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. That's the governor. And now you have your director of public safety making statements like damn the law down here, we make our own law. What kind of atmosphere was that to live in? I mean, this is your public safety director, so you really had no one to reach out to Black people for public safety.
No, that's correct. Until there was developed what I'm going to call a ministerial alliance, until they came together, the ministers of the city, the Black ministers of the city, and they began to talk about the various things that were going on. And the number one thing, of course, was the various bombings. But yes, Eugene Bull Connor was seen as what his title was, the Commissioner of Public Safety. And we know that our safety was not on the list of things to be protected. So we all knew his name. None of us ever expected to encounter him. Most of us only did on the day that children walked, the first day that children walked out of school, maybe the second and the third days. But after that, he wasn't someone that you would really see just being out in the city or somewhere.
It's I know you note in your book about at some point, directly or indirectly, as a result of actions by Bull Connor, you did suffer some physical injury.
I did. I was one of those students, graduate of A.H. Parker High School, and on the very first day that students marched, someone came to our school with a huge poster board sign, and the sign simply said, "It's time." And we knew what "it's time" meant because there had been the day before a large mass meeting at the 16th Street Baptist Church. I just happened to be at the church that day, the day before. I really didn't know that it was the very first mass meeting. I thought it was just one of many gatherings. The church was, because of its size and its centrality in the city, it was often used for meetings and other things. So I assumed it was another meeting. But when I heard the singing, when I looked out into the sanctuary and it was completely full. And back then we told people that the sanctuary held 1,800 people. So the balcony was full, the main floor was full, children were sitting in the aisles on the floor. And I wondered what it was. I had not heard that we were having a march or anything. I was aware of the bombings. I knew Dr. King was in town, but I did not know what this meeting was. But it was very energizing. Young people together, assembled together, produce a lot of energy. And it just felt very much, it drew me to the door, and I stood there and looked, and then I went out and took a seat. I just found one of the pews and squeezed in with some of the other children because I wanted to know what this was. I didn't know, but it appeared to be something exciting, something energizing. So I said, well, I want to be part of this, whatever it is. And I really didn't know that it was the very first mass meeting that I was attending.
Now, just to give our audience a better perspective of this, you were 15 at this time?
Yes.
And your classmates were they were 14 and 15?
Yeah.
So you're looking at all of this through the eyes of a child, young teenager, basically.
Right. Yeah, most of us were 10th grade.
Okay. That, again, your minds are just beginning to come into the adult world, basically. And so this is the dawning of your adulthood. And it has to be, I mentioned Dorothy Piedrahita earlier, and she, as you, were part of a children's movement. And I'm talking about junior high school, junior high school kids that walked out of school into a march in Montgomery, and the same results. I don't think people today have an idea of what it's like to be hit by a fire hose. Can you tell us about that?
Well, usually my first statement about that is that it's a very painful experience. I remember that at the meeting the day before, the fire hoses came the day after that meeting. But while we were marching to the school, when we arrived at the church, we were marching from the school to the church or to that vicinity. And I remember thinking to myself, I saw the little white army tank, and I was curious as to what it was and why it was there. And then I saw the fire engine, and it never occurred to me that we were going to be sprayed with water. I saw these things, but
Mm-hmm.
once the water came, I remember thinking to myself that no one said anything about water at the meeting. They had told us if you were going to march, the most important aspect of the march was to remain nonviolent.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you have to do, you are not allowed to hit anyone, or if they hit you, you can't fight back. You're allowed to kneel and pray. We must maintain the integrity of the nonviolent aspect of this movement. Well, there's no way to fight water hoses anyway, but we received all of these instructions. But my only thought was, no one said anything about water hoses. The other thing was, when they came to our school, we didn't know when they were coming. They said, you'll know when it's time.
Mm-hmm.
We thought it would be a week or two before they got it all together, but it was the very next day when they showed up at the school. They had a big poster board sign that simply said, it's time. So students began to just pile out of the school and all. But I tell you, I was thinking these things, but once I was hit with that water hose, the water hose hurt. It hurt a lot. And it was, my thoughts then were getting away from whatever, this. And so if you've ever seen the pictures, the buildings are not there now, but you can see students crouching against the building, trying to protect themselves from the water hose. There was not anywhere else to go because we were in a public park. And if you could get out of the line of fire, you could go back to the church. The church was right across the street over from where they were, doing the water. But they were pointing those hoses and not moving them. They were pointed at you. The water was coming out. So if you got up to move, they point in your direction. The force of the water hose is so powerful to just knock you over as though you weighed, and we probably didn't weigh much back then. I remember we were just skinny kids,
Mm-hmm.
But there was no way to protect yourself from the water hose. There was nothing you could do. You could crouch against the building. You could stoop, as some kids did, and put your arms around your chest and hold your head down. But in some of the scenes later, when they took video of the policemen there, you can see children being moved all over the street as though they were being pushed by the water hose. Well, they were being pushed by the water hose. It just pushed you as though you weighed about 10 pounds. It just, it's not something you can compete with in any way.
I've seen pictures of adults being knocked down by the force, which is, I think it's something like hundreds of pounds per square inch.
Yeah.
You could probably take paint off of wood with the pressure from that fire hose. That's how insidious that is. And there are a couple of things that stand out. And one thing is not just the courage, but the intense discipline that you had to master, something we missed totally today in these so-called peaceful demonstrations where that are supposed to be nonviolent, but there's absolutely no self-control or leadership involved. And no doubt, if the mentality that is used today for these so-called peaceful demonstrations was used back then in those days, probably many more of us would have been killed. Because judging by the two gentlemen that we talked about, Johnny and I can't think of any other person, uh, any excuse to shoot or kill a Negro was not a problem. And there was no accounting for it, which goes back to, we can talk about, can you talk a little bit about these men who were arrested? Um,
Men arrested for the bombing of the church.
yes. And what happened to them initially? Not later, but initially.
What happened initially was nothing. Robert Chambliss was arrested and charged with possession of dynamite, I think, but he was fined $100. And it would be 14 years before he would be arrested again and charged and found guilty. But he was 14 years later, he was the only one charged. It would be 2002, 2003 before the last two of the four were arrested. There were always suspected to be four men. One of them died while we were all waiting. And so Chambliss was arrested 14 years after 1963. And then the other two, it was over 30 years after 1963 that the second two men were arrested. I was subpoenaed to the trial of the first man, Bobby Frank Cherry. I was subpoenaed to his trial by his attorney, which was kind of, really left us with a lot of questions that his attorney would subpoena me, but Doug Jones was the attorney for the people.
Okay.
And I did speak with him. I called him, and I thought initially the subpoena I received was from Doug Jones. And it wasn't. It was from the attorney for Bob Cherry. And we don't know to this day what his motivation was for that, but I was forced to go to the court and give my testimony of what I remembered from that morning. I sat in the chair across from him, across from Bobby Frank Cherry, and the families of the girls were there. The questions they asked were basically, they didn't ask anything about September 15th. They said, tell the court what you do now. And at that moment, at that time, I was chairman of the trustee board. I was also chairman of the foundation, 16th Street Foundation. But I don't know why that was relevant, And he asked if I knew that his client was in the hospital the day before the church was bombed. And there's no way I would have known his client. I was, we did not interact. It was a very seriously segregated city. So there really was no interaction between, at least for the children, there was no interaction. As a matter of fact, I would tell people sometimes our school day, well, let me put it this way, a white school day began at 7:30 and it was over at 2:15. A black school day began at 8:15, 45 minutes after the others should have been in school. And we were released from school at 3:15. So we didn't, our paths never crossed. Unless perhaps maybe in a grocery store or a department store, every once in a while you might cross paths with someone, but definitely going to school and going home, our paths never crossed. So because of that, we were probably more segregated than anybody else. In fact, Dr. King referred to us as the most segregated city in the South, and then he called us the most segregated city in America.
My goodness.
That was probably a correct definition.
I'm captivated by, and I can't get over the fact that a church was bombed, 4 children killed. I don't know how many people were injured. We just talked about the people who were killed, but the resolution is $100 fine.
Right.
That says a lot about how Black people were viewed by not just your public safety people, but by your judicial system, by your state authorities, and even by the federal authority. That you basically were disposable and worthless. And that's to me what $100 fine says. So
something else you should know too is that when the church was bombed, this was the only occasion where individuals were killed. But this was bomb number 50. Prior to the church bombing, we already had 49 unsolved bombs. And so the church became number 50, but the church also became the only one where people died. The other bombings were of homes, churches, and places of business.
I do believe you had, wasn't your home bombed at one point? Damaged by bombs?
Yeah, it was across the street from my mother's house. This was 8 months after the church bomb.
Mm-hmm.
And we were awakened in the morning about 3:30 a.m. by the sound of the windows. We heard the bomb and the windows crashed in and things fell down in the house, and we didn't know what was happening, and we couldn't see anything because the bomb destroyed the lighting that was available through the telegram poles. But we heard these horrible screams, and we would not know until morning what had actually happened. But the person whose home was bombed, it was the Carole family, and the mother indicated that she was screaming because the husband slept through the bombing, and the 2 boys slept through the bombing, and she was afraid that she didn't know if they were okay, and she didn't know if something else was going to happen, if the bomb was going to go, a second bomb would go off. And so she was trying to wake them up. But once daylight came, about 6 a.m., we were able to see the damage to the entire neighborhood. If you had a car sitting outside, the windows were broken out. We had in our house we had a front window in front of the house. Most of those houses did. All of the windows on the front, if your house was facing the front of that house, all of the windows were broken out. Some of the cars were damaged because they were sitting out in the driveway. They estimated 15 sticks of dynamite, but it did quite a bit of damage.
15 sticks of dynamite. I know what 1 stick of dynamite can do. Terror. And I think that's the ultimate part of this is the terror. That it's the terror does damage. Yes, it does damage for that minute, but the terror lasts a much longer than that. One of the scenes in your book, one of the first things in your book is love that forgives. How did you arrive to be able to love and forgive?
Well, it took a while. It took a good while. The message of the Sunday school lesson for September 15, 1963 That was the title of the Sunday school lesson, A Love That Forgives. And it was taken from the text of Luke 24, where he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Mm-hmm.
If we had not been bombed and you had been able to hear the pastor's sermon that day, on the marquee out front, the pastor's sermon title was A Love That Forgives. So you would have heard that messaging twice. As a matter of fact, the National Baptist organization, through their Sunday school lessons that they prepare for the whole year, that was one of the lessons in the National Baptist books, A Love That Forgives. So, we talked about it that morning, and I probably have to say I forgot about it for a long time, the message, because after the church was bombed, my way of saying it is I was 15 when the church was bombed, but I think I stayed 15 for about another 20 years.
Wow.
I found myself just sort of stuck in that place. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why it was okay. Some of us grew up in fairly sheltered environments. Our parents were trying to protect us from everything. But I could never understand why it was okay and why my friends were gone, but no one was held accountable for that. So I spent years trying to figure that out. And I think a lot of it was fear because, again, 8 months after the church bombing, they bombed across the street. So it appeared to me that there was really no way for me to protect myself. There was no way for my mom or my dad to protect. And one of the other things that we talk about sometimes now, we didn't talk then, when the church was bombed, no one talked about the bombing of the church. No one talked about the death of the girls. The only conversation I had for the next 25 years was the FBI. If you were at the church on that Sunday, the FBI had a list of people who were there. That list contained 75 names. And if you were there, and if you were at least 14 years old, they came to your home or wherever you were and interviewed you to try and find out what you saw, what you may have heard, what you thought about that day. So that conversation, the two conversations that I had with the FBI, was the extent of my conversations, period, for 20 years. No one talked about it when we went back into the church. It was not spoken of. The church was renovated. I thought I would see rooms with perhaps their names on them in memorial or something. But it just appeared that what most people wanted to do was move on, to quickly just move on. When the church was bombed, the membership was over 800 people. When the church was renovated and the members returned, there were less than 400 people. So many people, I think, felt that this church was going to remain a movement church and would likely be hit again. And I think they were just afraid to come back. But there was a lot to think about. And you did it all thinking because no one talked about it. So it was all, if you thought about it, or whatever your thoughts were, they were just your thoughts circling in your head because no one talked about it. The very first conversation that I had ever was, and it started all of the other conversations. On the 25th anniversary of the bombing of the church, I received a call from USA Today. They asked if I would be willing to do an interview. And I thought to myself, and I think I said it to them, well, no one really talks about that. Why would we do an interview about that? And they said, well, we just thought we'd look back 25 years and see what you think about how are things now, kind of thing. And so I agreed to do that interview. And after the interview was published in the papers, that's when I began to get calls from, all over the country and outside of the country. And today it's, I guess I think I'm a relic of history, but when I encounter people many times and they'll realize they're actually talking to someone who's still alive, as the little boy said. I had a teacher call me from an elementary school, and she said, one of my students, he found your book somewhere, and he read it, and apparently he was really taken by it, and he went and looked on the internet, and he came in this morning, and he said, Miss Jones, she's still alive. And so he wanted Miss Jones, he wanted to know if they could invite me there because I was still alive. Everybody they were studying were people that were long passed away. So that was the very first experience I had talking with children, with young people. And I realized then that it was important for young people as well as talking with adults, because it is good to talk with someone who's still alive.
Absolutely.
Who bears witness to the pain and the suffering and the frustration that comes when we experience so much hatred.
I may have expressed this to you earlier when we talked, but it's great that you are here today to share this with us, because I think that we all need to have that insight. But there's another part to this, and that's basically, I can think of a better analogy, but you had to mentally peel the onion skin back. And that had to open up a torrent of emotion for you, just going through that. And I think about, I was struck by later on in your book, I think it's page 189, where you talk about the 23rd Psalm. Why was that important to you?
Well, it was one of the places that I found comfort. My Bible life started early because I, being the only girl with four brothers at the time of the church bomb, my mom would send me to stay with my grandparents in the summer, and my grandfather was a pastor, was a preacher, and we could not listen to the radio, we couldn't dance, we couldn't play cards, but we could read.
Okay.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the Vacation Bible School because there were other children there, and we made things, so it was really interesting. But and I had this tremendous sense of comfort and protection because my grandparents doted on me because I was the only girl, but they were also very, very protective. My father was the same way because I was the girl in the house. Mm-hmm. And all of that was shattered when the church was closed. I felt very loved, but I came to realize with the bombing of the church that my father couldn't protect me. My four brothers, none of them could protect me. And my grandparents, as much as I thought that I was in heaven, the world was free because I have these parents that love me. I have four brothers that have to follow me around in case they have to beat up somebody, and my grandparents. But after that church bombing, I really faced the reality that I had never even thought about, which was that there's really no one who can protect me on this earth, and I would grow to know that God can protect us from all manners of evil. But at that time, I think I became very uncomfortable because of the fact, number one, no one talked about it, and I remember being frightened. I remember being afraid sometimes, but no one ever. We just didn't talk about it. No one ever said, "Are you okay? Do you want to talk about what happened? Do you miss your friends?" Just none of that ever, anywhere. Even
No
when we went,
childhood counseling.
no. And then Monday morning, the church was bombed on Sunday. So Monday morning at we were back in school at 8:30, and there was no moment of silent prayer. There was nothing. There was just class as usual. There was no special assembly. There was just nothing. And we didn't have health groups or nurses that came to the schools for those purposes, counseling then. So you just kind of handled it in whatever way you were equipped to do it mentally. And for many people, it was a tremendous challenge.
I think about that. I'm relating that to a lot of the trauma that our students are going through today with these school shootings. We see the school shootings, and it's like, okay, these many got killed, these many got injured. Okay, that's it. But there are children, as with you, who are will suffer from the trauma of this if they don't get the proper treatment 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And that's horrendous. I'm going to go back to love that forgives, because to live under those conditions, day after day after day, which is about as repressive as you can be, and then to come to the conclusion that love is the answer. How do you get there? How do you get there?
It was a long road, a lot of study, a lot of reading, and most especially a lot of Bible reading. As a student going to school, my my direction was initially economics and business. But it's as though I did a sharp turn 20 years later, after I began to evaluate all of this and try to understand it. And I began reading things, going to school anywhere I could. I went to a couple of summer reconciliation workshops, and my focus left the business arena and went to, what good is any of this if we're all going to self-destruct? If we can't learn to work together to get along, what good is any of this? And so I just began to study more and more. I think the number one thing in terms of the forgiveness was first just working with myself. Number one, getting over the fear of thinking that, at that time, Birmingham was my world, so to speak. I had not been to many places, but when I began to travel, and I'm trying to tell you when the first trip was, but it was a realization. Something just came to me that said, well, these are wonderful people here where you are. Everywhere is not like Birmingham. And I've had the privilege now of traveling to 43 states, but to 9 countries. And India was one of the first places I went, and I looked at the poverty there, but I looked at the industriousness of the women, how pleasant they were, how pleasant everybody was. And I think if I were living there, I kept looking around. I said, well, I have a lot of reasons to complain if I were here, but no one was complaining. They were just delighted to see us, and it didn't matter who I was or what I looked like. And it was at that point I began to realize that Birmingham was not the world. Birmingham was just a microcosm of what was waiting out there. And that it was just one bad experience. And I guess the real gift, the real blessing was being able to leave, to get away, to discover that in other places there were real people who were happy and loving and enjoyed meeting new people. You know, all of these things were happening in the other places. So that was the beginning of it, recognizing that Birmingham was just not the world. Birmingham
Well,
was just what it was.
I go back again to wonderful book, and I want to mention a story that you related to me as we talk about While the World Watched and the impact you had, not you necessarily, but the incident in Birmingham had when you talked to me about your experience with a group of monks. Could you share that with our audience? I think it's great.
Well, it certainly was another one of those healing moments, just making the notion of forgiveness even bigger and broader. But I had the opportunity or the privilege to travel to Dublin, Ireland. And where I stayed was in Benedictine Monastery. And the monks there, the oldest monk there was 99 years old. Mm. And when I arrived, the first question that I was asked was where I was from. Where did you arrive from? And when I said Birmingham, Alabama, they all kind of looked, and one monk was, you know, everyone knew, and this is what I found to be true now everywhere that I've gone. I haven't been anywhere that they don't know the story of Birmingham, Alabama.
Wow.
I haven't been anywhere. But the monk, I believe that I probably received a lot of special attention by way of prayers and conversations and so forth, because I'm sure they had some notion of my woundedness and probably how I was perceiving the world. And so I spent a lot of time being reminded that I was created in the image of God, and that God is love, even if people aren't, He is. And just all of the things that we learn biblically. The words spoken from the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And then we have the scripture in Matthew that says, if we don't forgive, we are not forgiven, right? And so just going through that, listening to them, and but then somewhere in there, just kind of developing a new spirit about the world and all of the possibilities. And I think just having people relate to me as though I were one of them, which all of us are just one of them, but not being singled out because of being what color you are, or you know, for any other reason. It really was a new experience, and I loved it. When I visited there, and then the next place, it was just a new awakening. It was as if the curtain had been pulled back. And here it was revealed to me the rest of the world, and the world was beautiful. And the people I was meeting, all of the people were beautiful. And so it allowed me to see that everybody, everywhere wasn't Birmingham. And everybody weren't like the people that I had encountered in Birmingham. And with that, with just that little bit of information, I began to go back to my Bible. My grandfather had taught us Bible very well. And I remembered love your neighbor, love does its neighbor no harm. So I'm wondering, in Birmingham, what's being taught? Are we all being taught the same thing? Are we using the same book? This is what I said to them in the seminary when they said, we ask each student to tell us why they are here, what brought them here. And of course, trying to find an answer to why we love as opposed to hate. How do we dispel the hate? Trying to find an answer to that. I couldn't imagine why. I'm still kind of in that 20-year period I told you about.
Sure.
And a 25-year period, but I'm still trying to figure out things. And so my Bible teaches all about love, and if yours teaches that, why aren't we able to communicate and work together and do the things that people do? Why aren't the children able to play together? So that was when I was asked that question. Tell us what brought you to divinity school. What? How do you feel? Has God spoken to you, or that kind of? And I said, well, God spoke to me in His Word, the Bible, right? But I'm confused about what He's saying to other people based on what I see, based on what I experience. I remembered what my grandfather taught. I remembered all of that, what my parents taught. But why is it different? Why is it different in other churches for people who don't look like me?
Mm-hmm.
I tell young people today that they were a lot smarter than we were then. I really thought there was an answer to that, and you have a good heart. You just want to work with people. You just want to be good neighbors, be good friends, no motives. But I just didn't understand. And that was the biggest misunderstanding that I had. Why, if my book says, I must love you, I must forgive you, what does your book say? And we don't attend the same church. We may not be the same denomination, but what does your book say?
Mm-hmm.
And that was really where my real struggle was, And so I spent a lot of time trying to kind of investigate that, find some answers for that. I did a survey at one point, a national survey, where I asked over 1,000 people a lot of questions about working together, segregation, integration, and could we do it? Could America do it? And I received a resounding yes from the survey. And but I also visited a lot of churches because I wanted to hear the message. I knew what my messages. Yeah, I knew what my messages were, and I was accustomed to hearing Bible messages. So I thought, well, what's different? What is why? Why is it? Why is it different? What are they reading? That's what I asked in seminary when we arrived, and I said it like this. I said, I just wondered if we were all reading the same book.
Right.
What does your book say? And so, and I think deep down inside, that was the dilemma all along as a kid, not understanding why people could hate people they didn't know anything about, no matter who it was, in other countries, in this country, anywhere. How do we hate people that we know nothing about? And so I wasn't, I was a kid, but I was trying to figure that out. And later on, I think going to divinity school, I was just bold enough to ask the question. We have the same book. What do you read? What does your book say? So that was sort of the beginning of all of it. But I realized in reading the book that I could not make I could only account for myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can choose to forgive, but we can't force that choice on anyone else. We can choose to love, but we can't force that choice on anyone else. But I think if people see the example, this is what I learned, and that's what I saw when I traveled. People that didn't know me were willing to embrace me, and they were willing to sit and talk and share ideas about things we could do together. And so someone else had to show me that example for it, and I said, it is possible. We can do it. And in doing that, I was able to walk kind of slowly, a little bit at a time, but I finally started running. And I said, I think I've got it. I think I know. I just have to be what I'm looking for. I have to be the example. Some people have never seen the example. And that really is the case for a lot of people. So I just tried to become the example. And what I tried to do with the book, I wanted you to know what was going on in my 14, 15-year-old head. That's
Hmm.
really what I tried to do. I tried to capture everything I was doing and thinking. But the purpose of that was I said, maybe if people know how I felt, maybe if they know how much it hurt and how afraid I was and all of the emotions I was having, maybe if they read that and they see, maybe they won't do that anymore. Now that's the 14-year-old in me
Absolutely.
that was thinking that. And that, you know, when people see that they're really creating a problem, well, let's not do that anymore. But it didn't work that way, and I found that I just had to. Not only did I have to be the example, I had to be the example 24/7. You know,
I, I'm
all the time.
I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking of another 14 or 15-year-old girl who also, in the face of disaster and death, still had the innocence to look for the goodness in people, and that was the Diary of Anne Frank.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
there's wow. I mean, it's just amazing. There's you quote freely from so many of the writings of Dr. Martin Luther King. Um, at the beginning of your book, you talk about how characterizing hate as being a burden, and I think we can even go back to our Christian scriptures, really, uh, where it's looked upon as not so much as as referred to as a yoke or a burden, and freeing yourself, allowing you to free yourself of that, um, which isn't easy. It's the Christian walk is a walk. It's almost like you're walking uphill. It's a struggle. It's a struggle. With the ultimate end, the ultimate glory, uh, starts from within, and then it just blossoms out from there. But your story is we've had conversations. I've read a lot about you, and I'm definitely going to finish this book. Um, has to be enlightening to many. Has to be. I don't know whether it's received the publicity that it deserves. I'm going to do the best I can to get this out here to to a lot of other people, especially young people. Um,
You
as
know,
we're about.
it has received a lot of attention. The book has
Mhm.
received a lot of attention, and I think the book. Initially, I think all of the calls and invitations that I received came from the interview with USA Today.
Mhm.
And then subsequent to that, I did two shows with Oprah. So I think that the book wasn't there then. But
Okay.
once I wrote the book, I really started getting a lot of calls. Which also lets you know that the world is interested in love and forgiveness. The world is interested in reconciliation. I think anyone I've ever talked to wants to move forward, wants to get past whatever we call this confusion, and
Yes.
just live, you know. And if I can help you do something, I'll help you. And if I can't, I'll just keep living and keep moving, and I'll get to the next person. And I may need their help, not them needing mine, but whoever we encounter, you know, if we can help somebody, we do it. And otherwise, we keep giving our best to life, whatever that means, whether we're teaching or whatever role we have, is what I'm saying, working in the church, etc. But it's difficult. The scars, the scars are there when it happens to you as a child. I think as an adult, maybe you can move past it a little faster. I definitely think that it's the answer to things. You know, it is the answer to being able to move forward in a positive way and to to just enjoy people you meet and to love them. You don't have to know about them. You just know that we're called to love. And I think my challenge primarily was to those within the church arena. You know, God calls us to love, to forgive, and to love. And there is a biblical mandate even for us to be reconciled to each other in Second Corinthians. So we're called to do that, and wherever we are, we just need to keep that hat on. You know, our love hat,
sure.
our forgiveness hat, always ready to do whatever's required so that we don't get bogged down, you know, with the evil things. We just keep right on moving along. But I think the best thing that anyone can see is the example. You've heard that expression, be the example that you want to see.
Correct.
Some people will say you are the person that you're waiting for.
Wow, I like that one.
You are the leader that you're waiting for. But have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to maybe set a bad tone or a negative tone to what was going on? If it was a meeting or someone was presenting an idea, you can present a negative tone in places and nobody will honor that. They will, people can just look at it and keep listening, ignore what you said. And that is a lot of what we have to do sometimes, just to ignore the things that we hear around us. I have found that people are much more receptive to just a smile, and they might say, well, you know, what do you think about this? If you're in the grocery store, have you tried these cantaloupe? Are they any good? You know, it may be something as simple as that. But the smile, the pleasant face allows people to know you're approachable, right? It allows us to know that I can just say good morning to you, you know, and if you are someone who's offended me, I know because I'm a Christian, I know in my heart, and because it's in God's word, I have to forgive you because He has forgiven me for everything. For those times when I knew, for those times when I did not know, He's forgiven me. And because I had some not so good feelings when I left high school and when I went off to Fisk University, I wondered about people, and I didn't like people a lot, you know. But all of the negative feelings that we've had, we can love those away, forgive those away, and just think on good things. Whatever is good, think on those things. That's what we're told to do. Whatever is honorable, whatever is beautiful, whatever good things, think on good things. So this is what I try to do, and I don't try. I tell people it was a difficult journey for me. I struggled with a lot of things trying to understand, and I guess I thought that sooner or later, you know, my fate would be. My friends we were so close. If I had not known them as well, that might have made a difference in the struggles that I had. But it took me 20 years for sure to reach a point where I really understood what happened, why it happened, and to decide what I thought was the resolution to trying to move forward and trying to prevent that from happening. So
I think one of the lessons is that these things don't happen overnight under any circumstance.
Right.
To getting over that, and I think that's the mistake that we make, that we think things should happen instantly by the snap of a finger, and it doesn't. It's a growth process. I see someone has recommended a book. I think it's by Dr. Martin Luther King, The Strength of Love by Dr. Martin Luther King. Yeah. It's you know, we have this old saying, love conquers all, and it sounds trite, but when you look at our scriptures, our upbringing, and then the stories of people like you, it brings that to reality. And I think even part of your journey, your cleansing, was to run into people that said, "Hey, there's something better than this. That is not everything." And I say to everybody, and because of my own personal experiences, that God doesn't necessarily speak to us through the air, because then people say, "What's wrong with you?" But He uses other people very well to through them to speak to you. If you put yourself in the right position to be there, God will get His message to you. And it's what's not only is it great to get a message that way, but it's edifying to Him for a person like you to bring that message to others. And for that, we thank you so much for joining us here.
I have one more book I'd like to recommend. I think
Sure.
you mentioned a book that someone just mentioned. I think I have that book, Strength to Love.
Mm-hmm.
But Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, wrote a book during this time, and his book is called No Future Without Forgiveness.
Mm. And see, these are books written by people who suffered. And I think that's the lesson for us all. That's that's the lesson for us all. Um, that people who can go through what you've went through, what Reverend Tutu went through, what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King went through, and still come out of it talking with the message of love. It's just remarkable. And it's truly an example of what our Savior taught us. And in the midst of death, in the midst of unspeakable misery, he was still talking about love and forgiveness.
And forgiveness. And there is what I call a treatise of love in one of the books of Romans. I think it's Romans, the 12th chapter. I may have that chapter wrong, but love forgives all things. It's one of the sentences, one of the lines in that treatise. Love forgives all things.
Amazing. Well, I think we've kind of maybe come to the end of our program, Doctor. We're close to the end. I really, Dr. McKinstry, I really, really thank you for joining us. I'd like for everyone, if you don't have it, how do I do that? There we go. I'd like you to pick that up. If you look on my website on Facebook, look at my Facebook page. It's all over. It's been all over there for 2 weeks. You can call our station, text our station, get information on it. It's available. It's not expensive, and it is so informative. I mean, it's, as I said, it's a chronicle of history. Uh, Lots of good quotes from Dr. Martin Luther King and others, and I really appreciate your doing that. And I think you have helped and will help a lot of people, Doctor. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation, and God bless.
Thank you. It was our pleasure. And as usual, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to close out my program with the following words. And Reverend Dr. McKinstry actually typifies this. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears. Wow. Thou who has brought us thus far on the way, thou who has by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. Thank you, America. Thank you, Dr. McKinstry. We'll see you in 2 weeks, folks. Thank you.